Hello. I'm making a video for my mother, Marlies. My mother died about a week ago in Germany at age 88. She had a lung inflammation, she had age-related dementia, she had severe kidney problems, sickness where the kidneys were not working properly anymore. She has already been sick like this for at least half a year. And I'm not showing you. I have made many attempts to make this video, yesterday too, and even today, and so I hope that I can manage making this video, because this is obviously not an easy video for me to make. And maybe I will not talk sometimes in this video for a few seconds or minutes, I don't know. So, but if I don't talk, then stuff is happening in my brain, and I will address that. What's happening in my brain. This video is for Marlies. It is my expression of love for her. And it took me 2 days until I could even cry tears. We all expected this. This was not a shock for us, but it actually felt like a relief for everyone, for her. I felt relieved for her, because she was suffering tremendously, physically and psychologically and neurologically. She would say intermittently that she has become crazy and that she doesn't want to live anymore. She's expressed that many times. My brother told me that. But in Germany, they don't have a legal system to permit euthanasia. So, not yet. I hope that they will get that. I hope the whole world will get that at some point. And I remember a long time ago, it was in 1992 or 1993 it was. It was April 1993, I believe, when I had been at the center in LA and for 3 months, and my visitor visa was running out. I was going back to my parents for about 2 weeks to extend my visitation visa, and I could not wait to get there because I was worried about the Great Dane. The Great Dane had cancer and was very sick, and Great Dane of my grandfather. And at the airport, or even in mid-air already, landing in Holland, I think in Amsterdam, we land in. There was an intermittent stop before I boarded the airplane to my parents' house in Germany. And when I saw the weather, the cold, dark weather, it felt just like I was, that's just like Germany, of course. And as soon as I saw the weather and the specific seasonal trees and all of that, I could not wait to see the dog. I could feel instinctively he needed me, so I finally got to my dog, I guess 2 days later, because I first went to my parents' place and then the next day we went to my grandfather's house. And I was united with my dog, and he looked very old and very sick, and he had a white face, and he was suffering, he was not feeling good. He was happy to see me, but he was like saying that he is dying. And I felt terrible for him. And then we were all there when he was very, very sick. I had the practitioner come over, holistic practitioner, to check him out, and she said he had cancer that was very severe, and she gave us something for him, but that didn't do anything. And so the day came then, during that was just like 3 days before my flight back to LA, when the vet had to come and euthanize the dog. And we all gathered down there in the hallway, and the dog was on the floor. He couldn't get up anymore, and we put some blankets on him, and I was holding him. I was just lying partly on top of him, holding him. And my mother came over to me, and she was crying too, and she said, just know that the dogs have it better in this way than we do, we humans. They have that right to die when they're ready to die, and when the body is sick, and when the body is lingering in this dying state. So, and I said, yes, that is true, and that is very important. And they sent me away. My dad didn't. He couldn't handle me crying there. And that was before I realized how important it is to stay there with your animal. Stay there, hold your animal all the way through, and long past that departure. You have to stay with the animal to make him feel safe. But I was immature. I was ignorant at that time. I was 27 and ignorant and didn't know what to do, and as my brain was in total despair. I felt helpless. I didn't know what to do. My dad sent me out of the room, and I just screamed into the couch in the other room. My dad couldn't stand it. So the vet gave him the euthanasia injection. And I never saw the dog again. They just took the dog away and then buried the dog at the end of the property where all the other dogs are buried as well. All the other Great Danes. So I'll never forget that. My mother, the way she was standing there crying and saying, the dogs, the animals, they have it better in this way. We don't have that. And so then later, when I met Paul, then I started to realize all of these things, that, we have to be there with the animal. And I deeply regretted that I wasn't staying there with my lovely babe, my lovely Mausespeck that I called him. and his name was Alto. My grandfather gave him that name, Alto, and I called him Mausespeck, and I should have stayed there with him and held him all the way through. But I did this then to all the other dogs that followed in my life. So I want to politically stand up for the right to die. Okay, that is part of my mission here on this earth, that we create better laws, we create a better legal system where everyone has the right to die when they want to die. Okay. When someone expresses the wish to die, this wish should be granted to that person and not make that person in a state of neurological damage or physiological damage or psychological severe problems, whatever, unbelievably excruciating psychological or physical pain or discomfort, to make someone suffer like this, that's cruel. Okay, when someone expresses the wish to die, that person should be given this permission. Okay, that person should receive that assisted dying. Okay, as it is done in Belgium and Holland, and it's getting a little bit in that direction now. It's getting a little bit better, I heard, in Canada and also Oregon, but not anywhere near the way they do it in Belgium and Holland. Anyone can go there, anyone from around the world, and say, I want to die, and I am requesting assisted dying. And they will do that for the person. They have psychological talks for a week, but if the person is still persistent with that, they follow through. And I think that is the right thing to do. Okay. And I will always stand up for this and speak out for that, and do whatever, politically and in writing and in petitioning to move things in that direction. My mother had to suffer horribly before her body completely quit on its own, in the hospital, in the ICU. It shouldn't have to come to that point, so it should not. But, so, they told me they have been there for, I think, a couple of days, and the last day they were there, my dad and my brother held her hands on each side of the hospital bed. For long they held her hands for a long time. She was going in and out of consciousness. Her lips were moving. She wanted to say something, but there were no words coming out. And in tears, they both left, finally. And they talked to the doctor. They said they'll come back the next day. And as soon as they got home, the doctor called them and said that as soon as they had left, she died. And so it was still, my brother said it was still a feeling of, it's kind of like, I don't know the German word, krass, because that's how it felt when my brother told me that too. So I don't know how to translate that word into English. Krass. I don't know what word comes closest to that, or what word in English comes closest to that feeling, what you feel when you see someone dying, or when you heard about someone's death. It is. I mean, there are various degrees, of course, of this. That can range from a relief, but still, that feeling of krass, all the way to unimaginable shock and psychological terror. Depends on the situation, of course, and depends on how the person died and all of that. But when someone died after having been sick for a very long time, then you feel a relief for that person, but it still felt like this word, I don't know how to explain it in English. Not a shock, but it is like nauseating, like a horror, sort of. It's like a state of nauseated surrealness, like a wake up call or something, sort of like that. That's the best I can explain this. Like something that shakes you up in a nauseating horror kind of way. So sort of like a horror, but at the same time we also felt that relief, because 88, that's a long life already. So Paul's dad died at 88 as well from a stroke. And so that's when the body, for most people, shuts down. I don't want to end like that. I would rather be shot, so that's my wish. And I fight for the rights of everyone, of every being. I fight for the rights. I stand up. Fight is not a good word. I stand up, I speak out for the right of every living being to die when they want to die. Okay, so I fully agree. I'm fully on board with what Dr. Peter Singer said in debates with people, where I see that the audience, they seem to not even listen to what he says, what he's saying. They're so caught up in their own mind state of religiousness that they don't even hear what he's actually saying. What Peter Singer is saying is the people should have the right to die when they want to die. Okay, that's not like cutting someone's life off when they want to live. That has nothing to do with that. Or someone who's sick and suffering and they still want to live. Of course that is granted. Okay. What should be granted is the right to die when someone wants to die and expresses that over and over again. Okay, so there was this young guy and he was suffering horribly, and if I had met him, he was an activist for the right to die. Very philosophical, amazing person. I would have loved to be friends with him. I would have done anything I could to help him, with holistic healing and all of that. He was suffering from very debilitating mental illness and also neurological problems. And he wanted to die and he didn't. That was many years ago. I think that was like 15 years ago when he finally ended up committing suicide in a hotel room. And can you imagine? I don't think anyone can imagine. You cannot even wrap your head around this, what it's like to be suicidal, if you have never been in that mental state. For most people that act out on other people, most people seem to be more in the cluster B psychopathic direction, where they only react and lash out. They only act out on other people instead of reflecting on their own life. And maybe they can't reflect on their own lives. I don't know. But there's a number of people who are reflecting on their own lives, and they feel very helpless, and they are suicidal, and they don't want to lash out on others. They understand that wouldn't help anyone to do that, So those people would like to die, but they don't have the right to die. Okay. So in Holland, everyone has the right to die, and that's the way to do it, obviously. But that's why I'm for therapy help centers, creating therapy help centers worldwide, and one in each community, in walking distance to every single house, to every single dwelling place, okay, so that every person can just walk to that community help center in their community. And even if it's a sparse community, even if it's a desert community of, let's say, 100 people, they still need a therapy help center there. Okay, so everywhere on the whole globe, everywhere worldwide, okay, in every single country, every single community, we need to have that. And it needs to be run as a non-profit, and it needs to be run as a real help program for people, not some ridiculous approaches that psychiatrists use or psychologists use that don't work. We need to use every approach to this that really helps people and combine that, okay, Vipassana meditation, but without the sleep deprivation. That's very important, okay, so, and there's always space for improving something. Just because some ancient person or philosopher has written something, an ancient philosopher, thinker, psychologist, so on, doesn't mean that it is written in concrete, doesn't mean that can't be revised. Of course it can, and I am sure that is also in tune with that soul, okay, to pick up on it and to work with it. That's something that's alive. A therapy approach is alive, just like languages, and the world we live in is alive. Existence is alive and non-linear and convoluted and non-finite. So things are constantly happening and changing and shifting around, and things are completely moving and growing and shifting and developing all the time, okay? So whatever people have written in the past could be helpful, but it needs to adapt itself to the present moment and the present situation that we live in, of course. Also primal therapy, we can incorporate this, but it needs to be revised, it needs to be worked with, it needs the therapy needs to grow, it needs to adapt itself to the current situation, and it needs to work together with other approaches. It can't be exclusive. Nothing can be exclusive. Everything is part of the other. Okay. Every approach is a perspective on something from a different angle. That's all it is. And we can find common ground, and we find common language to combine these approaches, like Vipassana, like Arjanov's primal therapy, like Tony Robbins' approach, to awaken the giant within. Everyone has a giant inside, the child, your inner child is that giant. Okay, so that inner child that has not been contaminated with society is still in touch with the infinite. Okay, and is still able to hear and see the infinite in a mental state of quietness, in a mental state of complete humbleness. Okay, and encountering someone dying and someone who has really taken that worldly spacesuit off, that's very humbling. That's very sobering. And I saw that in my dad particularly, in my brother too, but my dad particularly, I saw such a tremendous shift between the last conversation and this very last conversation. I mean, between the conversation with him before the last conversation and the last one. What a tremendous energetic shift I saw in my dad. And suddenly he was not atheistic anymore. He wasn't rigid anymore. He wasn't clinging to something. So he started to realize and recognize something. And he said that they saw what was happening in my mother. They saw it right in front of them. They saw there was a soul that was trying to free itself out of that body. Okay. And she's free now, and it was around that time. We were at the other house when that happened, and it was around that very time, right after my brother's birthday, on April 3. Like April 4th or April 5th, somewhere around that time. I think April 4th, when I don't remember exactly what my brother said, but it was right after, the day or so after his birthday, when that happened, when they went to the hospital and they saw her. They saw the difference in her from the day before. This time the body was shutting down, and they saw the soul wanted to free itself. They both saw it, and they're both very rational, they're both very scientific people. Okay, and they saw it, and that was very humbling. So, but that doesn't mean that scientific means rigid, of course, but I mean, they were much more skeptical before they saw that. That's for sure. Sometimes it takes a situation like this for us to really recognize it, to really see that the world we live in is not a concrete, rigid, unmovable world with material objects. Okay. Rudolf Steiner knew this a long time ago. When Rudolf Steiner was a child, he was living in Austria, and his dad was working as a train driver, and he was there to pick up his dad. His dad was coming to the final destination and getting off the train and meeting him in that train house, an old train house. It must have, it was somewhere towards the end of towards the end of 1800, I believe, around 1820, something like this. No, around 1880 is when that happened. Around that time, when Rudolf Steiner was like 6 or 7 years old, he was waiting there for his dad, and there was a chimney in that train station house, and suddenly one of his aunts appears in that chimney out of the air, and she floats out of that chimney and is floating in the room, and she says to him with a very despaired facial expression, "Now or later you must help me." And a few days later, and then she disappeared back into that chimney, so right after she said that. And then a few days later, they told him that this aunt that he saw had committed suicide. And that left definitely an impression on that child that would completely guide him onto that entire path of inwardness and looking beyond the physical. Rudolf Steiner was a genius of epic proportions, and he has really created something in the world that really helps people, that helps his aunt, that helps her soul. And what she meant by that was, of course, not just her soul. She meant by that her soul and everyone else's soul who is in a bardo situation, who is in between death and heaven, and who is unrestful, who has not come to closure, who is suffering. So there is a world out there, in here, everywhere, in your room too. And that's not scary, that's not frightening. Okay? That is the world we live in. Okay? There is the physical and there's the non-physical. And I'm reading The Secret Doctrine. I have been reading in that book off and on. It's a heavy book by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. I'm probably going to read in those books for the next couple of years, so at the pace I am at. I'm not always reading in the book. But in the first chapter or so, or second chapter, she talked about quantum physics. And she wrote that book around 1880. Around that time when Rudolf Steiner had that encounter. I don't know if he ever had the chance to meet her. Probably not, because he was too young, and she was towards the end of her life. So she died at age 60, way too soon, of course. They always had it too cold, and they had to constantly put charcoals in a charcoal oven, and she had someone to take care of her, but that person wasn't very responsible, and she was so immersed in her writings that she would forget to put the charcoal into the oven, and so she would always get way too cold, way too hypothermic, and then that she was also way overweight because she wasn't exercising. She was just writing. And so the combination of that, that caused her much suffering and caused her body to shut down. Very, very sad. And I believe that Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was also the soul of the blue god. And so then she died in 1890. So, and then 5 years later, 1895, was when the soul came back in form of Jiddu Krishnamurti. That's what I believe. Other people may not believe that, but it doesn't matter. One can't fight over that. It's just like, it's okay. I believe this, so what? You believe something else, it's okay. So I see these kind of connections. I don't know why. So my mother herself was an atheist. She didn't believe in a deity, but that was, of course, that was a rigidness that was out of fear, I believe. I had a phase like that in my life. Okay, so I know how that feels like. When you just don't want to believe that there is other stuff out there or in here in your room, when that scares you and you want to hold on to something else. You want to hold on to something rigid or something like that is very material, or some people hold on to religion. Okay, that's just as rigid. So whenever people hold on to something, some kind of belief, atheism is a belief. It's not a religion, but it's a belief. So you can believe there is Santa Claus, you can believe that there is a tooth fairy, you can believe there's an Easter bunny, you can believe that there is none of that, and you can believe that there is no such thing as deities and God-level souls and the infinite cosmos being conscious. Some people don't want to believe it. Paul, for example, that's a form of rigidity. Okay, it's a psychological problem. That's however you would. It's a clinging. It's a rigidity. It's a state of resistance towards truth, and also towards reality, because reality is immersed with the physical and the non-physical at all times. So it took me a long time, it took me many years until I developed these terrible migraine headaches, and I had terrible hatred towards some people. And that's when the blue god came into my life. That was in 2003. The blue god fixed my migraine headaches, my anger, and I started to go into my own mind. I started on the holistic path. I had already quit the pharma drugs, and I was in that withdrawal phase, which made everything 100 times worse. The pharma drugs never helped, but they also had side effects, and they had direct side effects, they have long-term side effects, They cause eye twitching, which I sometimes have. They cause restless leg syndrome, that has gotten a lot better now. So your body and brain has flexibility. Plasticity, that means it has the chance to heal. It has the chance to recover and regrow new cells that are not affected, that are not polluted, and so on. So it's a long healing journey, okay? But it's worth it, 100%, 1,000% worth it, to go on the holistic path. Okay, so I had quit the pharma. I knew then that I was already on the holistic path. So I knew this wasn't going anywhere. It had been making me sick, but I was still an atheist at that time. And then I had these migraine headaches, and then the blue god showed itself for the first time. And then I started painting the blue god in many different forms, because the blue god is amorphous. The blue god shows up in many different forms, as Helena, as Jiddu, as Gautama. Many different forms, as Kenny, Redwood, our Great Dane, the blue god. And people, they'll think this is total batshit crazy and all of that, you know. So why would the blue god show himself to you? Why would he manifest himself into a dog that you would adopt? Well, those are good questions, but maybe because I was ready. Okay. I was ready. If the student is ready, if your ears are ready to hear, if your brain is ready to hear, then the answer is coming to you. So I think Hermes Trismegistus was also one of his incarnations. And I've been listening to an audiobook from Hermes Trismegistus, and that was an ancient philosopher. I don't know, forgot now exactly, but a couple of 1,000 years old, somewhere out there in Greece. Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes, I forgot now what that meant, but Trismegistus means, before I listened to the audiobook, I thought Trismegistus means the threefold teacher, the 3-time or the 3-discipline teacher, or just 3 times the master, 3 times master or teacher. But they said that it means 3 times great, 3 times greatness. So, but teacher and greatness, you know, that if it's a good teacher, then that can mean the same thing. So greatness is a teacher. It can come in many different forms. Okay, so it can come in form of art. It can come in form of sunbeams, or a person, or a dog. Okay, so Kenny Redwood has taught me a lot about dogs, about the world, about animals, about the infinite cosmos, about inwardness, about patience, about myself. I would say my most intense healing was happening during the time Kenny was staying with us. For almost 9 years he was staying with us. About 8 years, and 8 years and 8 months. 8, the infinite cosmos. So 8 years and 8 months he was in our life before he took his Earthian spacesuit off and went back into the clouds, and there he showed himself in clouds. I was still lying with him on the grass. We brought the body back with us to the other house and took the body out onto the grass on a tarp, and I lied there, snuggled up to his back. I put my arm around him, my face into his neck, holding him. He was still very, very soft and everything. The cells were still alive. But the consciousness was shut down, and the infinite cosmos soul was not in him anymore. He was like a stuffed animal. And I look up into the sky, and suddenly there are white clouds in a blue sky appearing. And they slowly, very slowly pass before my eyes, in front of me in the sky, from left to right. There he was, his formation, his shape. And he was smiling, like he wanted to say, "Don't worry, it's good, it's all good, it's all good." I dreamed about him recently again. I miss him infinitely much. I miss him the most, of course. That was the blue god. That was the most beautiful living being I have ever seen in my life. I didn't even know something so beautiful, stunning, and like shining, like blinding, literally blindingly beautiful. So blindingly beautiful that sometimes I felt like I don't deserve to look at him. That's how beautiful Kenny was. The blue god. An albino, oversized Great Dane with light blue eyes. Everyone on the street, they would come out of places, I don't know where these people would come out of. At parking lots. They would come all the way across the parking lot and they would say, "Can I take a photo of your dog?" Of course, I would always say. I wouldn't have survived this if the papa dog had not come to us to save us. So, 2 months later. And when the papa died, that's when I fell. That's when I fell into hell, psychologically. Yeah. And then we didn't have a dog for 2 years. But then I prayed to the blue god and I said, "Please bring me a god level. In any form." I thought that would be a man, but it doesn't always come the way you wish it for. So a god level came to us in form of a dog. And that is an infinite present. Okay. And yeah, he's not easy, but that's how we learn, that's how we grow, that's how we adapt, that's how we become inventive, that's how we heal, that's how we become more patient, that's how we understand that not everything in our life is like a red rug rolled out for you, you know. Or if you have a difficult child or a difficult dog, those are our teachers. Okay, they're here to teach us what it means to love someone unconditionally. You know, even if they're a little bit challenging or problematic, or if they don't get enough exercise, they will shred everything. So that is the school of life. And that's not a harsh school of life. So, a harsh school of life is what my mother has gone through in her life. That's what I call a harsh school of life. Some people have it harsher. They have a harsher life than others. Okay. It really depends, I guess, on the soul journey. And some people say that we make the soul contract before we come into existence. So this is how the life we want to live in order to grow, in order to learn. Okay. I have some ideas about my future lifetimes, and they seem also challenging, but they seem acceptable. So I accept that wholeheartedly. I'm going to come back as dogs in my future existences. Okay. And then after that, and again, as a woman. And then I don't know what I will come back after that. Maybe as a werewolf. Okay. That was designed in some kind of laboratory in the underground medical research facilities of Utah for the military. Some kind of hybrid, you know. Hybrid wolf-human. Extra large, like 10 feet tall. With gigantic claws that are like hands. Enormously long fingernails. And it really, really long muzzle, like a crocodile almost. So yeah, maybe. Okay, it's all school. And then maybe in the future, I will come back as a King Kong robot from South Korea. Who knows? All of these things are cool, I think, and I accept that. So, and my mother is resting now, okay, way out there in space, Orion Nebula, Horsehead, probably Horsehead Nebula. I have the feeling, okay, that she's at the Horsehead Nebula, and she loves horses. And so rest there, Marlies, rest and let the blue God's hand hold your hand for as long as you need that. Okay. And when you're ready, you make a new soul contract and you come back as a European basset, okay? And if you do come into my life like that, or in any form, I will love you unconditionally. And I'm infinitely sorry that I have talked shit about you. I'm sorry that I have complained about you. I'm sorry that I have given you a hard time in endless conversations and accusations. That was an act out. But I didn't know. And I made you suffer, and I triggered you from day one, and it was harsh for you. There were emotions that were unresolved, and it was important that I broke away from you. It was important for me, it was important for you. I love you, I love you, I love you infinitely much. I love you unconditionally, Mommy. I'm sorry that you suffered. You suffered a lot. You were in a lot of resistance, and that's terrible, terrible suffering. Okay, so no more suffering. Okay, complete oneness now with that what is. Complete leaning into that what is. Okay. And the soul journey is a long one, and you had just started your soul journey, I don't know, maybe a few incarnations back. So a soul journey is long. Thousands and thousands and thousands, maybe millions of incarnations long. Okay, that's how long a soul journey is. And that's okay, Take your time. Always go into your own mind, you understand that. And it's good. The blue god is holding your hand. Be well.